on. Go ahead.
Good morning, Phoenix. Welcome to the Parks, Arts, Transparency, and Education Subcommittee. Is now called to order. Has anybody looked at item 2, review and approval of May 27th, 2015 PATE subcommittee meetings?
Move to approve.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Items 3 through 5 are for information only. There is no presentation planned. However, staff is here. Anybody have any questions regarding item 3 through 5? No? Thank you. Items 6 through 10 are for consent action. No presentation is planned. However, staff is available to answer any questions. Does anybody have any questions on the consent action items? No? Does anybody have a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Item 11 is for information, discussion, and possible action. It's fiscal year 2015 to 2016 Community Arts Support Grant allocations. Thank you, Gail, for being here.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, good morning. We're here to talk to you about the Community Arts Grants Program. This program has been administered by the Office of Arts and Culture since 1986. And I just wanted to point out that economic impact studies conducted every 5 years since 2001 tell us that Phoenix arts and culture sector contributes more than $300 million in economic impact to our city, serves more than 5 million attendees annually, and generates more than $14 million in Phoenix tax revenue. Now, that's a return of $20 for every $1 invested through the work of these organizations. And over the past year, this grant program has helped to support approximately 7,000 performances, 300 exhibitions, 2,500 classes, and 3,000 school programs. The recommendations that we bring to you today are the result of community review panels that rank the applications in each category using specific criteria. This year, 33 individuals, including artists, educators, nonprofit administrators, and others, participated in the panel process with the purpose to identify the best investment of funds for the cultural services to Phoenix residents. Each panel is chaired by an arts and culture commissioner. The panels included representatives from diverse community. This year, our panel composition was 44% non-white. In addition to ethnicity, we also look for diversity in age, gender, and sexual orientation. So my colleagues, Dwight Walth and Ashley Hare, who are seated next to me, they run the grants program, and they're going to lead us through our short presentation today.
Good morning. Slide before that? Oh, all right. Well, the Office of Arts and Culture has 6 categories of support for the arts and cultural community of organizations. There are 3 graduated levels of operating support, a rental subsidy program in partnership with the Phoenix Convention Center, 2 project-specific categories focused on the arts and culture of diverse communities and education partnerships. Our deadline for submittal in all of these categories was March 23rd. Prior to our deadline, we invited the cultural community to come to grant orientation workshops, which we held at city community centers spread throughout the city. Also prior to the deadline, Ashley and I make ourselves available to read through drafts and provide feedback to the applicants prior to their final submittal. Applicants are invited to hear the review of their application by the panel that Gail described, and this gives them rare insight into the panel process and helps them to improve their presentations for other grant opportunities. For those who are unable to attend, Ashley and I provide a full report of the panel's comments and rankings, and we make ourselves available to them to talk about the review and their application after the panel process. So Our grant program budget for this year, $680,346. We're very grateful that the budget is being sustained at last year's level. The State Arts Commission, which is another significant funder for these organizations, is experiencing a major cut this year, and they expect that their grants to the organizations will be reduced by about half. And so we're very grateful that we've been sustained. It's important to note that this graph reflects only the general fund dollars allocated to the programs. It does not include $125,000 from the Phoenix Convention Center, who we partner with for the rental support program. So general operating support category 1 supports our largest cultural organizations, those with budgets over $2.5 million. The city is an important source of unrestricted operating funds, which are very difficult to get from other contributed sources and very important to the organization's sustainability. The city's investment in and endorsement of the services provided helps the organizations leverage critical funding from other sources. In this category, the recommendation is just over $348,000 to 11 organizations, and it includes organizations such as the Phoenix Art Museum, Phoenix Theater, Children's Museum of Phoenix, Phoenix Symphony, and Desert Botanical Garden. We have a full listing of all of the recommendations at the end. In this category, the panel considered and ranked each organization based on their artistic quality, their financial position. They look at audited statements and other financial documents. They look at their public value, as evidenced by their education and community outreach activities. They look at diversity, and that's diversity of the board, diversity of their staff, diversity of programs and audience. And they look at the administrative ability, the qualifications of the administrative and programmatic staff. In general operating support category 2, this is organizations with budgets of $250,000 and larger. In this category, the recommendations are almost $139,000 in funding to 10 organizations, and that includes organizations like the Phoenix Voice Choir, the Phoenix Center for the Arts, Phoenix Chorale, Phoenix Conservatory of Music, and Free Arts of Arizona. The evaluation criteria is the same here as we use in General Operating Support 1. In both these categories, General Operating Support 1 and 2, the award recommendation is determined using formulas that are derived from the organization's total operating budget and the ranking that they receive from the panel. General Operating Support Category 3 is our capacity building level, and this serves smaller cultural organizations with budgets of at least $25,000. These organizations receive just a flat $5,000 award. In this category, the recommendation is for $40,000 to 8 organizations, including Roosevelt Row CDC, the Shemer Arts Center, Young Arts Arizona, Grand Canyon Men's Chorale, and the Cultural Coalition. The unique criterion to this category is the capacity building initiatives. Organizations are asked to identify strategies and plans that they undertook in the past year and what they're proposing for the next year. Strategies that are designed to improve their governance, their administrative and/or artistic capacity. And then the rental support program, which, as I said, we do in partnership with the Phoenix Convention Center. They manage Symphony Hall, the Orpheum Theater, and they provide operational support to the Herberger Theater. So this category gives special assistance to the resident performing organizations at these venues. And that includes the Phoenix Symphony, Arizona Theater Company, Ballet Arizona, Arizona Opera, Valley Youth Theater, Center Dance, and iTheater Collaborative. This category is not reviewed by a panel. These organizations demonstrate their eligibility for support by meeting a certain minimum number of performance requirements, and they provide us monthly cash flows. In this category, the award amounts are calculated based on the number of performances that they do and the number of seats in the venue in which they do the performances. And so next I'll turn it over to Ashley, who administers our 2 project categories.
Thanks, Dwight, and thanks for having us today. So very briefly, I wanted to tell you about the Arts Learning Partnership, because this is something that's really exciting we focused on this year, is looking at the partnerships between arts organizations and our schools, our community centers, our libraries, senior centers, veteran services, all those places where arts learning experiences could be happening. So in this category this year, arts organizations could apply if they were partnering with a social service organization or a school or someone, other organization or company County or place in the city of Phoenix. The Arts Learning Partnership Grant focuses on these partnerships and collaboration, and they promote these lifelong learning in the arts with these partnerships. These projects serve not only youth, but adults and seniors and intergenerational groups. In this category, we funded 11 organizations this year for a little over $30,000 that you see on the screen. What is exciting about this category and the festivals category I'll talk about is we also open this up to organizations that do not have nonprofit status. We have a lot of small emerging grassroots organizations doing really good arts learning work in our communities, and we wanted to make sure we were supporting them through our grant program as well as other professional development services we offer in our office. So we had some organizations actually apply this year who do not have nonprofit status. The one requirement for these organizations, they had to partner with a larger nonprofit arts organization. So not only does that partnership help them apply for grant funding, but it also helps them partner with a larger organization to grow the capacity of their small organization. So for example, on the screen, Cyphers, the Center for Urban Arts, it is a small organization that focuses on hip hop culture and breakdancing, DJing, spoken word, and other elements of hip hop culture with young people. And they applied for the first time this year, was awarded a grant for their new school field trips that they're going to be doing. And they're using Phoenix Center for the Arts as their fiscal agent. So Phoenix Center for the Arts will be helping Cyphers administer that program, grow that program, learn how to market and promote that program. So this is a way to help those small organizations, and we're really excited about this opportunity. The festivals category, is our last category. The festivals category grant supports our Phoenix-based festivals that are open to the general public that act to advance and preserve and present and celebrate the culture in the city of Phoenix. This category, what we do, we have very similar criteria when we're looking at public value and artistic merit. What we also look at is the education component. So not only what these festivals are doing on a 3-day weekend, but how are they activating our schools and doing outreach programming? How are they activating our local businesses and our local artists? Both of these categories require a minimum 1-to-1 match of the grant award, and the award is based on the ranking, again, from the applications that they receive.
I guess we lost the slide that shows the full, is it not there?
Yep.
Well, you have in your packets, I think, information that shows the entire breakdown of all the organizations and the levels of funding that that has been recommended. These proposals have gone to the Arts and Culture Commission and have been approved by the commission. So again, the total amount of funding from general funds, $680,346 from our office, and an additional $125 from the convention center, for a total of $805,346. That's our presentation. We'd be happy to take any questions you might have about this program or these recommendations before you.
Does anybody have any questions? Councilman Nowakowski?
Yes, on the outreach part of it, do you contact the consul offices to actually help you with the outreach of the grants, or that we actually have newsletters that we send out, email blasts and stuff? Because one of the things that I'm concerned about is the whole outreach aspect of it. It seems to be a little cliquish with individuals that are already involved with arts groups that are involved with our arts commissions. So how do we reach out? How do we end up getting new groups involved?
Right.
And how do you use us as council members that are involved within our own council districts to get those individuals more involved in creating new groups also out there, right?
Yes, Councilman Nowakowski, Chairwoman Pastor, we did send to the council offices both an announcement about panelist opportunities and about the application opportunities. We've actually, through this past year, done a concerted effort to try to map our cultural assets and identify the larger community of organizations. We've identified 160 arts and cultural organizations. Not all of them are nonprofit 501c3, which is one of the reasons we did the policy change to allow those organizations that didn't have that status to apply using a fiscal agent. So we've done a concerted effort this year to try to reach out, and also our orientation meetings were spread geographically through the city to have a wider reach. But it's an ongoing effort to communicate and to identify and encourage those organizations that don't have professional grant writers, and it's one person often doing many, many, many things, to meet with us and learn how they can be successful in our program.
All right, I actually didn't receive anything, so maybe we can talk, I'll talk to my staff and
Certainly.
figure out where the hiccup happened. I know that we received information yesterday about that. The other thing is, I love the concept about the art learning and reaching out to groups that aren't nonprofit groups, but also that whole social service part of it also. Do we actually use some of our own centers? Because I was looking at the people that were awarded, there's probably, I don't see that many that are involved with our rec centers, our own youth centers, our own activity centers and that.
So something I've been doing with an intern from ASU this year is looking at this first year that I've been in this position, is mapping all of our rec centers, all of our community centers and libraries, making a list of those, what programs they already offer, arts programming they already offer. And then as we go into next year, start having those conversations to make sure we are partnering with those rec centers and community centers. We do have some small organizations that are in some of those, at like East Lake Park, for example,
Right.
doing a little bit of work. But something that I'm excited about in this position is to make sure we have this documentation and we can really start partnering with these community centers, because we actually use the community centers to do our grant orientations this year. Geographically, when we went north, south, east, west, we did them all in City of Phoenix community centers, took some information from the programmings that they're doing now, and then had this great idea to start these strong partnerships with them.
Yeah, being a father of 6 children, I can tell you it's hard to find activities for our kids. I mean, our libraries are doing a great job, our rec centers are doing a great job, but if we can start bringing all of our resources and start using the facilities that we have to extend those programs. I mean, I feel sad for these young teenagers. They really don't have a place to go after dark. When I was growing up, the churches used to have record hops and all that, but there's not a place where young people can actually hang out and have a good time in a safe place. So maybe some of these programs can help out with that.
I agree.
The other concern I have was that since 1986, we've been funding some of these programs. I want to make sure that we don't end up becoming a crutch for some of these organizations, and that we help them to grow and become self-sustaining in the future. And at the same time, how do we attract new and up-and-coming groups and basically spread that wealth throughout the whole city, but also among all the different art groups, especially those up-and-coming art groups that are trying to form, and we become that hands up for them to actually become a nonprofit art group that can reach out and provide art programs throughout the city of Phoenix, right?
Councilor Nowakowski, we share that concern, and I think this topic is a major part of our strategic planning for the next few years to investigate ways that we can spread that outreach.
All righty, thank you.
I have a question because I'm piggybacking on some of the questions you had. We have a summer program, a rec program with Parks and Recs. How does the arts department work with the park department in the programming of the day?
We don't at this moment work with them, but I have met in the time that I've been here, I have met with Parks and Rec staff and started talking about ways that we can start merging together. Unfortunately, a lot of it has to do with funding and hiring these artists in, but I think we have some ideas.
Councilwoman, historically, those have been separate programs, but again, as Ashley said, those are things that we're looking at carefully to see how to move forward, perhaps in a different way.
Well, I guess where I would would like to explore would be to look at when there are arts organizations or nonprofits having professional development, possibly the opportunity for our parks employees that work with students be developed, or also possibly nonprofits coming in and helping our employees that run the after-school programs and also the summer programs be able to provide some resources or some training so that it doesn't necessarily we have to hire artists. It's amongst our own employees that are being trained and be able to deliver any type of art project. Because there are students in our parks attending right now, and we do need to, I believe, strengthen that program and really build it to where there is a strong wait list for people wanting to come to participate in these programs and make it a stronger piece for families. And also exposing the arts to the kids in these areas. So that's just.
That's a great idea, Madam Chair.
That's great.
After listening, just wanting to see that. Any other questions?
Just one last comment is that even I'm noticing a lot more bilingual or Spanish-speaking groups that are out there. Any of these information classes or meetings are done bilingually or geared towards Spanish speakers?
Not at this time, but we did speak with your staff yesterday, and she had mentioned that as well. And that's an idea we'll carry forward for the next round.
And then the last recommendation would be, all these panelists are great panelists that you have, very diverse. What I would recommend is maybe next year having maybe one person from each of the council members, if we can suggest individuals from our district, seeing that we represent the whole city and we're very diverse in each of our districts, and basically those concerns of if we have a special program with the library during the summertime or with the parks, that we can recommend individuals and start to use all the different resources that we have within our own districts and those great volunteers that are very supportive of the arts program, that we can suggest some good names out there for y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a public speaker card, Joseph Benesh.
Thank you. Joseph Bench with Phoenix Center for the Arts, one of the awardees. And I just want to speak to your comments, Councilman, let you know from a testament of Phoenix Center for the Arts that we share your concerns about spreading the wealth. Are we being inclusive, up-and-comers? And Phoenix Center for the Arts has that model very much. We've got 10 different smaller arts organizations that use Phoenix Center for the Arts as their home, 6 who have offices, one of whom you saw on there, the Cypher Center for Urban Arts. And so that wealth is very much being shared with them. Our sustainability of our classes allows us to do more of the outreach. So most of the money that we get in grants isn't going to operations, isn't going to my salary, it's going to our outreach programs. The Art Mobile program, which provides free art classes for children in underserved and low-income communities. Our scholarships to get kids into the summer camps who can't afford to pay for it. So just to let the council know that there are organizations like ours who are sharing that wealth specifically with the kids, because we have the sustainability and the partnership with the Parks Department, that we think we're using our funds hopefully very, very wisely and spreading them to the community. And we all know that there's a public safety component in that in terms of keeping the kids busy and off the streets on the weekdays after school and on the weekends.
And just really to respond back, Joseph, I mean, your program is great. It'd be great to have that program in every single district, and that's our goal, is to have partnerships with people like yourself that really care about the community and care about the arts. Thank you.
Thank you. We're ready for our next item. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate all the work.
I think we need an official approval.
Oh, do we need an actual, it says, oh, wait, I'm already on 12, sorry. It's just a possible action, so. Go ahead.
I have to declare conflict on this.
Okay, all right. We have a conflict, Councilman Valenzuela has a conflict regarding this item, so would somebody like to make a recommendation?
Go for it.
We're waiting for Councilman Waring to
What,
make the
you want me
recommendation.
to make a recommendation?
If you'd like.
I assume it's not a conflict if I have a membership in one of these organizations. I'm paying that.
Somebody going to make I can recommend the recommendations.
Let me see what
I
it is
recommend the request that the subcommittee recommend City Council approval of the fiscal year 2015-2016 Community Arts Support Grants recommendations.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Yay! Motion carries. I'm doing great today. Thank you.
Debatable point. Sorry, you asked.
That's a debatable point between me and Councilman Waring. Item 12, update on Phoenix Parks and Preserves Initiative. Ingrid will be here to present.
Good morning, Chairwoman Pastor and members of the subcommittee. This report addresses the questions from the subcommittee related to the Parks Preserve Initiative, commonly referred to as 3PI. In 1999, Proposition 101, the Phoenix Parks and Preserve Initiative, received voter approval to increase the Phoenix sales tax by 1/10 of 1 cent for 10 years. Then, in 2008, nearly 83% of the voters approved Proposition A, the renewal of the 1/10 of 1 cent sales tax for an additional 30 years. 3PI funding is appropriately used in a variety of ways. Examples include completion of regional parks, purchase of land for the creation of new parks, park improvements, operation and maintenance of parks and recreation facilities, park rangers, and recreational programs for youth. Since its inception, and including the projections that are going through the end of this fiscal year, revenue for 3PI has totaled $429.6 million. Total expenditures and transfers out of the fund have totaled $392.6 million for park development, renovation, and improvement projects. It also includes operation and maintenance expenses, along with the purchase of our desert preserves. A few examples of these projects that use 3PI funds are 9 regional parks, Steel Indian School Park, Cesar Chavez, Reach 11, and Dust Devil among them, Apache Wash Trailhead at the Sonoran Preserve in the North Phoenix area, numerous playgrounds, swimming pool repairs, the addition of walking paths and fitness stations, sports fields and area light improvements, dog park construction, as well as accessibility improvements commonly known as ADA improvements. Most recently, the department completed the award-winning Phoenix Tennis Center, which is in District 5. The summary list is attached in your packet and is attachment B. The Phoenix Golf program was previously an enterprise fund. However, it began realizing some annual operating deficits, which over time was really a significant cumulative deficit. Due to this, the city manager requested that the Budget and Research Department conduct a study of the golf program to identify options that would be available to improve this financial condition of our golf enterprise fund. The study was presented to the Parks and Recreation Board, the Parks, Arts, Family, and Seniors Subcommittee, and in 2012, a Citizen Golf Ad Hoc Committee was created, and over 500 citizens attended 5 public meetings, 2 committee work study sessions, and they reviewed the options and discussed the golf study report. The Citizen Golf Ad Hoc Committee created an action plan that included the golf fund balancing plan. The City Attorney's Office has provided a legal opinion, which is also in your packet, labeled as Attachment A, regarding the extent to which 3PI funds could be used to pay the deficit incurred by the golf program. The action plan was presented to the subcommittee and then to the City Council, and on March 6th in 2013, by a vote of 8-1, the direction of the council was to convert the Golf Enterprise Fund to a special revenue fund, retire existing debt, take measures to reduce the annual operating deficit, and utilize the general fund to cover any future annual operating deficits. The deficit accumulated by the end of the fiscal year 2012-13 was to be eliminated over the 3 years, and that was the direction. A total of 3 transfer payments from 3PI totaling $15,032,000, and you'll see on the screen there the various years that we've made the payments, And so the total was over $15 million. Since the implementation of this plan, the financial condition of the golf program has vastly improved. We went from losing $2.4 million in 2011-12. We reduced that in 2013-14 to $714,000, and we're currently on track to be under $500,000 this year. As part of the Golf Action Plan, a consultant, which is Touchstone Golf LLC, was hired to develop a 5-year business plan. That plan included an expenditure plan. Touchstone Golf issued a report that was presented to this subcommittee in March of this year. It identified the need of $8.25 million in capital improvements in order for these improvements to maintain the course infrastructure, irrigation systems, as well as keep our customers satisfied and coming back to pay for rounds. In the future, once positive revenue is realized, staff will determine an appropriate plan that will include reserving funds to identify the capital improvement projects that we need, but also identifying a timeline to repay the 3PI fund. The 3PI fund has obviously made a positive impact on our community. It continues to be a critical component to ensure the health and vibrance of our parks and recreation system. And everyone who visits the city and lives in the city can witness these improvements day in and day out when they visit our parks, when they go to our recreational facilities, or when they go on a trail hike in the desert preserves. And at this time, that's my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
I have 2 cards that want to speak on this. Jerry Van Gass.
Thank you, Councilwoman Pastor and council members. I gave you some background info up there because there's quite a bit here. This appropriate subject, though, 3PI funds. This time, 2 years ago, 2013, June, City of Phoenix entered into a intergovernmental agreement with the town of Paradise Valley to basically front them $450,000 for the construction of a roundabout on their street and to be paid back over the course of 3 payments, $150,000 each payment. We can find no evidence, and neither can the Oversight Committee for 3PI, that this money, these 2 previous payments, have been deposited back into 3PI fund. The checks were made out to the City of Phoenix treasurer. Our presumption is that they're in the general fund where they're not supposed to be. The money came from 3PI. It should go back to 3PI. We insist that there's 1 payment left on July 2nd. We insist that the Finance Department follow that payment into the 3PI fund, investigate if the other 2 payments were put into the general fund. We want it transferred back into the 3PI fund. My question is that if we hadn't intervened back in 2013, we waited a whole month till all of July was gone, because it says in there the payment would be in July. August 1st, we filed a records request. The check wasn't cut until August 26th from Paradise Valley. They deferred. They won't even. We asked to inspect their file on this project. They said we don't have one. We only have what Phoenix has given us. So check with Phoenix. So we're going to do that. But I find it hard to believe that $500,000 you wouldn't have a file on that project. So we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Sarakowski.
Well, I have a question. So do we have a tracking of that money, and is it going back to the 3PI fund?
Indeed, our intent is for it to go into 3PI. We will verify it. We show it as a reimbursement, and so we will verify that and get back with Jerry on that. But we do show that we have received the 2 payments, and we show that we have invoiced or we are about to invoice for the July payment for this coming year.
Perfect, thank you.
When you say reimbursement, I understand what reimbursement means, but where does the fund money go back to?
I'm going to verify that it went back into the 3PI. I'm going to track it and verify that it did.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tim Sarakowski. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I think it's time to come to the realization that it's responsible government to sell golf courses. I would highly recommend that Palo Verde be the first golf course to be sold, that money to then go back to 3PI money, because overall, golfing and going out and playing golf has dropped 30% in the United States the last 3 years. Have an overabundance of golf courses in Phoenix and Scottsdale and other areas of this town. So selling a couple of golf courses and really taking the money that is necessary for what people are doing in this town, for example, hiking and doing other activities outside, would be a lot more beneficial to the community. I think we have to realize that we need to do this type of behavior not only for the citizens, but for the entire community, and really start developing more of a community atmosphere that tourists will come here and do other activities and allow the golf courses and golf people to do their own thing from now on. But I think now we need to start deciding which golf courses need to be sold. I would start with Palo Verde. I understand there are deed restrictions on the property. We can sell that property. We can put the money to better use than what is being used at the present time. The golf course fund, if you need $8.2 million, where is this money going to come from? You know, you're dumping bad money over bad money. $8.2 million, and then you have a deficit of $500,000 maybe. That's $9 million. Where is this money going to come from? And I guess we have to ask that pertinent question, where's it going to go? Where's it going to come from? So now we need to start to become more realistic here and say, it's time to start selling these. Let other people who have other ideas about golf courses run the golf course systems in this area. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm an advocate for all of our golf courses, and I think that there's a solution. I don't think selling them is a solution. Palo Verde is one of the golf courses that I grew up playing on. Palo Verde and Canto, and of course Maryville. Just a few dollars, a kid who, really, I'm no Tiger Woods, believe me, but it gave me an opportunity to be exposed to a sport in my world that only belonged to those of more affluence, I guess. And it felt good to be able to learn to play golf and and so the solution, I think, is public-private partnerships. There are two golf courses in District 5. There's Maryville and there's Palo Verde. And what we did in Maryville was we approached Grand Canyon University. GCU is now renovating this course. They're pouring in about $12 million into this course. It'll be the nicest municipal course in the country. It'll attract tournaments. Their golf team will play on it. It remains a city course. It'll always be a city course, city fees. They're going to have a new clubhouse. We'll have one of the largest first tees programs around to teach kids to golf. The next Tiger Woods just might come out of Maryville. That's the solution. The solution is to hold on to our green space, hold on to our parks, hold on to, the city of Phoenix is the 6th largest city in the country, and I'm not an advocate for letting go of those types of spaces. People use golf courses. They love walking around the course. They walk their pets around, and so I certainly understand the concern. In fact, so much so that I went out and found a partner that took on Maryville with us. We used to lose somewhere in the range of about $270,000 a year at the Maryville Golf Course. That's no longer. City of Phoenix no longer pays that. Every taxpayer in Phoenix wins because of that public-private partnership. We need more of those to save our golf courses. I do want to also make mention that and I advocate for every single golf course in Phoenix that's owned by the city of Phoenix. Okay? For the record, though, the Palo Verde Golf Course is not the least used golf course in the city. But if you find the least used golf course in the city, I even advocate for that one. There's a solution here. You're right. There are people who know it better than we do, and we need to bring them to the table. I totally agree with that.
Thank you. We also have a Greta Rogers. I'm sorry. You will next.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. My name is Greta Rogers. I'm here to talk about 3PI money being used to retire golf debt. This was approved originally by this subcommittee on March 6, 13, same day at 3 o'clock, formal meeting counseled by a vote of 8-1. Mr. Waring was a no vote. On that council at the time, we had 3 attorneys, Simplot, Gates, and the mayor. You had been advised by the city attorney, Gary Verberg at the time, that this was lawful. I have spoken with 3 attorneys pro bono prior to going further with this, and the opinion of each one, having read the initiative which was provided them, this is an unlawful taking. This is fraud. There is absolutely no permission in the initiative by hint or inference or any other expression of authorization to pay debt from 3PI. It's acquire, operate, maintain. Annual audit, which was never done until 13. I'm going to offer you a proposal, and it's non-negotiable. Non-negotiable. This is paid back in 3 installments beginning this coming fiscal year, which is just 1 week away, plus 3% interest per annum from date of taking to payment received. Presently, mortgages, according to New York Times business analysis of all kinds of money investments, was 3.99 as of the close of business Friday, last Friday. So at 3%, you're being given a savings. If I took money and had to pay it back, I'd have to pay interest. You're no different. You're no less responsible. I want you to approve this. I want you to propose it to the council, and I want the council to take action on this no later than your meeting 10/7/15. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Waring.
Thank you. First, before I speak, I will disassociate myself with the previous speaker's comments about fraud and other stuff. So I'm not piggybacking on that. Second, Councilman Valenzuela and I, a lot of respect for Councilman Valenzuela, we just have a difference of opinion on this particular subject. I think we should sell the courses, use the money to pay this back. If you had put, again, taking aside the legalese and the fraud and all that stuff, in 1999, if you had put on the ballot somewhere in there, by the way, we're going to pay off debt for the golf courses with this fund that you guys are all voting on, it wouldn't have gotten vote 1. Same in May 20th of 2008. Neither of those would have been, I think, something voters would have thought, yeah, that's what we should be doing. Let's approve that. So for that reason alone, I think we should be undoing this and unwinding this. As far as the golf courses go, I'm not saying there's no benefit, but we are losing money. It's $500,000 this year. Is that correct? So the plan is to pay back the $17 million out of the profits from courses that haven't made money since what year?
It's been about 10 years, but it's
10
also.
years, and I think that was an anomaly, right? It's pretty been since '99 that they've been
Been a
losing
while.
money consistently. So 1 year in like the last 15, I don't have the chart in front of me,
Right,
but
right.
I think you're nodding, so you know it better than I. So 1 year in the last 15, it's made money. Obviously, the trend is in the right direction, but at the present pace, it's going to be decades before we could ever come close to paying this off. As far as how nice our courses are, I sincerely doubt any of our courses are going to be the nicest in the country, given that the U.S. Open was played last week at a municipal course in Washington. Chambers Bay is actually a municipal course. There's a fascinating article in Sports Illustrated, should you choose to read it, about the development of that course. I could probably go on all day long about what they might have been thinking, but they got a U.S. Open, good for them. It costs like 200 something bucks a round to play up there for a municipal course, but it's pretty nice. They hosted a U.S. Open. I doubt our 6 courses will ever be hosting U.S. Opens. So, to Tim's point, we do have a lot of courses and so forth. Obviously, they're doing fine. Some that aren't. Golf play is down. So again, the projections that we're going to get this money back through our normal course operations at the courses we currently have that have been losing money for 14 out of the last 15 years, I don't know. I couldn't go look a voter in the face and say that's a plan. That's our plan. It's going to work. I can't wait to have all that money back so we can go spend it on parks. This is not going to happen. There's only one way to make that happen. But I understand the minority on this issue, buried the minority, because as Greta mentioned, it was an 8-1 vote. So it's just me, but I wanted to say my piece. So I just don't think the course we're on is realistic at all. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Valenzuela?
I want to invite Councilman Waring and the entire council out in October when we cut the ribbon at the Maryville Golf Course, a city-owned course. And I bet it'll even put a smile on your face, Jim. It will be the nicest course, municipal course. It will attract tournaments. And we're very proud of that public-private partnership. And every taxpayer should be proud of that public-private partnership. We are no longer having to subsidize that golf course because, and it's going to drive more tax revenue because people will want to golf. People are going to be coming from all over the valley to golf, that golf course. And that's a positive thing. I think that's the key to this here. Some of our golf courses, we are not golf operators. We need help in marketing these golf courses. We need help in perhaps, maybe renovating here and there through a public-private partnership. It's been done at Papago with ASU and Maryville with GCU. So it's not just a thought. It's not just a theory. It's an actual solution. There's a blueprint there. And yes, there's only one ASU and one GCU, but there are others out there that we can approach for other aspects of our golf program. How much do we subsidize for parks? What is the fee for anyone who'd like to use a public park? To use meaning I'd like to play basketball today with my son over at Dust Devil Park there, 107th Avenue in Camelback. If he and I would like to play basketball for a couple of hours, what do we have to pay for that?
It would be free.
Absolutely. It would be free. That's the point. If we want to throw the football around, if we want to, it would be free. If there was a fee, and I thank God that there's not a fee, because now if there was a fee, we'd be talking about selling those things too, because we're not making enough to cover those expenses. At some point, it's a community, it's a quality of life issue. It's trying to figure out what is important to our families and to us. And is this golf program important to the city of Phoenix? I, for one, will say it absolutely is.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a suggestion is that there's some accusations made here about the 3PI money. I believe that we need some legal advice. Either we go into an e-session in the near future, this subcommittee, or ask for all of my colleagues in an e-session just to explain, because the way that we were explained about it, it didn't seem against the law or we were doing anything outside of that, and that I would like to get an update on that and get some legal advice. The other thing is back in spring of 2013, we had hearings, and I mean these subcommittee meetings were just filled of advocates and individuals that were advocating against golf courses. After listening and after having many debates, and it seemed like the supporters of golf courses outweighed the individuals that were against it. So as a good steward of your tax dollars, we had to go with the majority. And that's what happened back in spring of 2013. We asked our staff to figure out a way, and then that private partnerships that Danny was talking about was created for some of our golf courses. And there's partnerships with ASU, with Grand Canyon University, that was created, and we ended up getting a vendor for all of our golf courses. So saying that, I'd like to see if we can do that in the near future, get some legal advice. And Mrs. Rogers will, after we get that legal advice, we'll see by October 7th if we can get something done.
Oh, Councilman Waring, I forgot.
You didn't have to cringe.
No, I'm
Feel
thinking,
bad.
I'm thinking
I haven't
because I
talked that much
forgot.
today. No, you
You're done.
just
Okay.
grimace. So again, I think you guys understand. I may disagree with the votes, but obviously I'm not saying there's fraud or anything like that. But I do agree. I would second Councilman Nowakowski's. Since we've got a new city attorney, not the same one who, or at least acting city attorney, not the same one who rendered this opinion. It might be good to have the executive session discuss it. I actually think that's an excellent idea. So thank you for proposing it. I guess I would just say about the courses and so forth. I hate voting for like a plan that I don't think is ever going to reach fruition. We're ever going to get this money back. It is very good, though, that we're doing the public-private partnerships. So the folks who negotiate that's a good thing. It's definitely better than the status quo, in which we were hemorrhaging, I think, about $2.4 million, maybe at the peak, but it was a pretty consistent $2 million a year for several years. So that's a good thing, that the plan is making things better. But again, I would say if you put it on the ballot and you told voters, this is what we're going to do. In fact, we want a special tax. So as I'm looking at it, we've spent since December of 1999, $392.6 million. Okay, so I assume that figure includes the $17.5 million that's been taken out. Okay, so like
the 15
by my
million.
math, just doing it in my head, it's like 1/20th of the money that's been spent was to pay for debt on the golf courses. I mean, you can buy a lot of basketball courts and stuff for that, resurface a lot of that's already there. I do not in any way put the golf courses in the same category with playing basketball at the park with a young son or something like that. I think that was the example that was used. I just don't. I don't think voters would either. I'd certainly be willing to put that to the test. Everybody wants to put this on the ballot. So I don't think this is what voters had in mind. Whatever legal opinion, that's the kind of stuff. But the legal opinion says that's the kind of stuff that drives voters crazy, because I don't think anywhere in any of this it said golf, did it?
Not the exact words. It said recreational facilities.
I don't know how else you say it, playing with a stick on I don't think it used golf anywhere in there at all. And again, my dad plays on the courses all the time and stuff. It's good that people go play them. It's just, they're just hemorrhaging money that could be spent on these other activities that I also put in a totally different category. It has been a traditional city responsibility to provide open spaces for people to play. I don't know how old Central Park is in New York, but I think that goes back quite a number of decades for sure, if not centuries. In fact, surely at least 1 century. I just, that's a traditional city responsibility in a way this is absolutely not. And that's why I have the objection. But I'd like to hear the ideas for different plans and so forth to get us out of this, to the extent that's possible, and also get the renewed legal opinion. I'd be interested in that.
Councilwoman Pastor and members of the subcommittee, the great thing is this is an information item. And the second thing is we are planning to come back in the fall about the golf program and to talk about that. So we do have that on a tentative future agenda item.
Well, thank you. Hopefully, we'll get some new basketball. I think we have new basketball backboards happening recently. But so thank you for that. It's our inside
I'll
joke.
help. I'll help put them up at
We
midnight.
can talk about voting against all that stuff until we get this taken care of.
Okay.
Got to be more
Thank you.
responsible with your pennies before I will put your stuff.
Oh, you're So item 13, athletic field allocations and conditions.
Chairwoman Pastor, subcommittee members, at last month's subcommittee meeting, Councilman Nowakowski asked us for an update on field allocations as well as conditions. And the fields that we use in our system are really part of the heart of our Parks and Recreation system, in addition to our mountain parks. The Parks and Recreation Department utilizes a athletic field allocation policy, which was approved by the Parks Board in 2008. A copy of that policy is also in your packet. The department has 140 sports fields in our current inventory, We are adding 2 more as we speak at Cesar Chavez Park. The light poles were erected last month. The allocation process does include all fields with the exception of Reach 11 and our 4-field softball complexes because those are primarily used for tournaments and large-scale events, and they are allocated on an annual basis so we can get big tournaments to come in because they have to plan ahead for those kinds of activities. Fields are allocated to a variety of groups. Let me move on to the next slide here. They're allocated to a variety of groups, including soccer, football, baseball, softball, lacrosse, cricket, rugby, and even old school kickball, which is making a comeback. We've got some kickball leagues that are playing as well. There are 3 seasons which fields are allocated. They're fall, spring, and summer. Summer, the requirements in the use dies down, obviously, because of the heat, but also because family members are doing other adventures and sometimes not participating in those kinds of activities. Later, I'm going to talk a little bit about the renovation to the fields that we do so you can have a better understanding of that as well. City programs are our highest priority as well as maintenance for the fields. Second comes to the youth-serving organizations, which are more than 4 teams in an organization. If there's less than 4 teams, they're considered individual users. Contractual obligations such as IGAs with schools. And then the adult organizations receive the lowest priority just due to the fact that we really are trying to serve the youth. We do have some fees associated. The youth fees are $12 for residents. The adult fees are $34 for residents. And then last year we did add a $5 fee for the lights, the sports field lights, for any time between 6 and 10 p.m. This last fall, 2014, we had 165 organizations with a total of 3,000 teams that received allocations. The staff that manages the process are here today, and I'd just like them to raise their hands so you can see who those folks are. They're out there on the evenings and weekends making sure, and you can see in this picture here, trying to make sure that we're communicating clearly with the people who are asking to use the facilities, and also making sure lights are on, restrooms are unlocked, things of that nature. They also help us with any kind of illegal activities that are in the park, and there are eyes in our ears for the evenings. Obviously, the most popular times are Mondays through Thursdays from 6 to 8 p.m. because that accommodates the youth practices. We try to be really mindful, and parents obviously want their kids to come home so they can get the appropriate rest, do their homework, and be successful in school the following day. Saturday mornings are also popular because that's generally when games are played or also when scrimmages and leagues are played as well. So the renovation of facilities. We use Bermuda grass in many of our facilities. Obviously, some of the facilities like Reach 11 that we talked about earlier, they have a higher quality turf and they're just managed in a different manner. But June 1st through August 31st, we really have to go to town. And I don't know if you can see the picture here, but in front of that goal mouth, it is really pretty worn and it looks brown and not green. And so we really see those wear patterns in the middle of the fields, in the soccer fields, obviously in the outfields where the outfielders are playing because there's wear patterns there. So staff does a great job through the summer renovating and restoring the turf. We aerify, we fertilize monthly. We go to a 7-day mowing schedule and we mow at a 2-inch depth because that's our height, so that's the best for the quality of the turf to maintain. And so you'll see that in September the fields really look their best. They go dormant October, November, when it starts to cool down, and then obviously we're not growing grass again until springtime comes. The sports fields are one of our heaviest used assets in our park system. We do our best to try to balance the demand from the users, but also to try to maintain the quality of the fields. Usually in March, we get a lot of complaints about dusty fields, and that is a reality. We try to water them where we have that ability to water. Some of our fields are flood irrigated, and we don't get flood irrigation until April, so that isn't always an option for us. We have procedures in place. One of the comments that we heard also was how do they get communicated with, how does the staff get communicated with on the weekends and the evenings? And we do have a communication system in place where they can make a phone call to a general number. That phone call gets routed. I've tested it myself. The average response time was between 3 and 5 minutes the particular day that I did it. And so staff calls back the user. Those numbers are on the regulation signs as well. So even if somebody doesn't have a field allocation with us or have that number on a piece of paper that they've received, they can also call through that number and get access to our rovers who are on. Again, they go out there, they address the issues in the field, they identify if there's overuse going on and educates the community that maybe that they're using it in a manner that's going to cause additional damage. Our policy does allow us to work very closely with those folks that are renting the facilities. We also do allow for payment plans where people ask for us to extend the time to pay it off during their season. So they have to have it paid off by the end of their season or it'll affect their allocation the coming year. And we also communicate about rainouts and things like that if there's damage to the fields or lights out or something of that nature. So we've been working with the staff to even the folks that have the allocations, maybe we just give that direct number so they don't have to go through the automated system. They just call directly. And I think that's going to be an improvement we are able to make very quickly, and it's easily done in our next allocation process, which is happening now for the fall season. So that concludes my presentation on field allocations, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions?
I have a couple questions. You talked about the maintenance and downtime during the summertime. Is there any fields that are actually open during the summertime, and what are those?
Yes, and I can get you a list. There are quite a few, but they're limited, and we do rotate them. So if there's some fields that we've been able to do the maintenance on, it depends on use too throughout the year. It has happenstance. Yesterday I was driving by Coronado Park,
Right.
and there was absolutely no place to park. There were 3 soccer games going on the east and west direction on a field that is normally for 1. So there was lots of use. And then behind them, there was a reservation for the folks who do the sword fights. I can't remember how you say that
yeah.
name, but there was a reservation for that. So again, it's not just for sports. There's lots of other activities that go on as well. And that park was absolutely full last night.
I know that you all have orientations that are for the allocations of the field to educate people how to fill out the package and all that. One of the biggest concerns we're getting at our office is that there's a lot of Spanish speakers, especially for soccer. And do we have anything an outreach to those Spanish-speaking teams? Because that's the biggest complaints we get is that they go out there and they start playing soccer and then all of a sudden the field's reserved and they don't understand the process, right?
Chairwoman Pastor and Councilman Nowakowski, we do have, when we have the meeting last year, we did it both in English and Spanish.
Great.
And we do have quite a few of our staff who rove at night are bilingual. So especially where we know we have the need to have that skill set.
And then the other complaint we get is that individuals that have neighborhood parks or regional parks in their zip code area, that they're actually allocated fields away from their neighborhoods. Example, Levine. They're not able to play at Cesar Chavez, but they're spread out throughout South Phoenix, where you have teams from South Phoenix playing at Cesar Chavez, traveling from South Phoenix into Levine, and Levine going from Levine to South Phoenix. How do we coordinate that? And is there a priority of individuals that live in the neighborhood to use their neighborhood parks?
Chairman Pastor, Councilman Nowakowski, we don't have a policy that identifies that. However, we do find that most of the time people are requesting parks in their general area. With Cesar Chavez, it's going to be very helpful that we have 2 more fields coming on. So that's going to address that. Obviously, Levine is a growing area. It will grow in the future. And we do have some parks out in that area that as we can use 3PI funding, we'll be able to develop those parks in the future as well.
And have we looked at best practices at other cities or even other complexes? I mean, we have that West Valley Sports Complex, and they have about 13, 14 soccer fields out there every weekend. It's jam-packed, and their fields are nice and green. And I was amazed on how much usage those fields get and how green they are.
Chairwoman Pastor and Councilman Nowakowski, we definitely continue to look at other organizations in other cities and what they do. Obviously, when we establish the fees, we establish them based on the feedback that we got from other communities. So we'll look at the field qualities and the things that they're doing to make sure their fields are in top shape too, and we'll apply any things that we can.
I just want to congratulate you. You're doing a great job as
Thank
the
you.
acting director, and and you're bringing the staff, you have a wonderful staff. I mean, they're hardworking. Maybe in the future, we could look at maybe changing the times that individuals work on the parks, because I know that in the evenings, when I drive by most of the parks, you have soccer teams, baseball teams, and activities going on. And you have an individual that's roving from one park to another. Maybe there's somehow some way where there's heavily rental going on, that we can actually have staff there, because a lot of times people don't understand that you can actually reserve a soccer field or football or baseball field, and then you have neighborhood people in there trying to say, well, this is our park, you can't just come in with the league.
We definitely will look at all those things.
All right, thank you.
One of the things, and it's not about the good thing is not about our city, is that I've been traveling around all weekend, or all the weekends, past weekends, into baseball tournaments. And one of the items that is really one of my pet peeves, and I think it's many pet peeves for many mothers, are the restroom. So I'm hoping the quality of our restrooms are up to par, especially in those areas where high use is happening. Just spot checking and making sure it's clean, and having they're open, and also having the items that are needed for the restroom available. So thank you for the park staff and doing the good quality work that they do. I can be a testament in other cities of what needs to be improved. So thank you. Thank you. Item 14, department's budget update.
Ready? Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, we are here to give you an update on the budget for the Office of Arts and Culture. As we reviewed the last couple of times, our budget for this year is $1,544,692. That is a combination of our current operations budget plus grants, which you'll see on the last page. So we're looking at May this month, and you'll see not a lot of change. In past months, we've talked about the large variances from month to month, and those have to do with anomalies in posting. In the October, the difference in October had to do with posting of the grants and a reposting of the grants. And then in February, March, that related to work order credits. But by and large, around $55,000 is a normal expenditure for us. So not much of a change for May. And the top 10 expenditures stay pretty much the same as well from what we looked at last year. The increases tend to be in the salaries and benefits category. And again, this is just another look at the grants. This year, we're looking at a total of $72,000 in grants in our budget. Any questions?
And the 15% increase was just because of additional staff that was granted?
Yes, the vast majority of that, and we'll see that at the end of June because we hired a person in May, and you'll really start to see that change in June.
Perfect. And then you're within your budget, so
We are.
congratulations.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Human Services Department budget is a little over $62 million, and we use this to serve. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, thank you, Rita. The Human Services budget is a little over $62 million, and we use this to serve a variety of great programs for the residents. In Head Start, we serve over nearly 3,500 children between our Head Start, Early Head Start, and our new child care grant. Our family service centers see somewhere between 13,000 and 14,000 households and individuals to help with rental assistance and utility assistance. Our senior centers, we have 7,500 registered seniors who go 3 to 5 times a week. Serve over 580,000 meals a year. Our Family Advocacy Center sees 5,900 or more victims throughout the year, and then our homeless programs helping serve 67,000 families, as well as many of our own staff working in those areas. So it's a great variety of things that we do with that $62 million. The monthly expenditures throughout the year, we are looking at May, and as you can see throughout the year, on any given month, there's a variety and there's a variance, and that is due to the way that invoices come in, contracts are paid out. In this particular year, we did not encumber certain funds when we did last year. Overall, we're a little under 5% where we were. And again, overall, this is because of encumbrances and then contracts and the way they come in. The invoices come in, we pay them in the months that they happen to hit. And the top 10 expenditures, not a whole lot of difference. One thing I do want to point out is our facilities management. While it's not one of the real high in the top 10, we did have we have our John F. Long Family Service Centers, where we have had a severe roof repair that we needed to do, $200,000. So we see, variances like that throughout the year, depending on when it's happening. So we've encumbered those funds to make sure that we can make that repair. We didn't have any particular anomalies this particular reporting period. As far as revenue is concerned, want to point out in the grants, most of this, almost all of it, is our Head Start grant. And again, as we get through the end of the year, as we have delegate agencies and other contractors, when they hit last year, we did encumber many of the contracts. This year we did not, but it will catch up as we move through the end of the fiscal year. And then in the Head Start program, we have 3 months to reconcile after the end of the city fiscal year. We also have in our rentals, the Family Advocacy Center does have some individuals that rent space there. And then we also have some revenues posted for our food contractor, Salrico Services, rent some of our trucks. So that's that. And that's, any questions?
Well, Mo, congratulations. I mean, you're under 5% from last year, and you're doing a great job. You're keeping within your budget. And the other thing is that you even had the John F. Long roof repair on top of that, so it was all within the budget, so congratulations.
Thank you, Councilman.
Good morning.
Morning.
The library's budget at $35 million, which supports all of our facilities and a wide range of library programming, including the summer reading program, which is currently underway. Thousands of families are coming to the library right now.
Very much aware of that. Every night.
We are too. Very busy. And the whole intent of this program is to keep kids reading over the summer. Our expenditures, like Human Services, varies throughout the year based on timing of invoices, et cetera. In May, you'll see a significant decrease, but overall, for the total, we're pretty much on track. One of the issues in May has been the implementation of e-procurement, which delayed processing of some invoices, but we will be caught up by the end of June. Our expenditures, top 10, very much the same that you have seen before. The one percentage difference you would see is library materials is a bit lower this time because many of those invoices were for library materials. So that makes the other percentages a little bit larger. No anomalies. And here's our revenue. We've talked about these. The grants, state grants is the first things first. Donations, I'm sorry, I'm skipping around. Donations is primarily E-rate reimbursement. State grants is the first things first. Room rentals, copier fees, those are the copiers for the public, and then library fines and fees. Any questions?
No, I do know that, off sidebar comment, but those stickers are very, a great incentive because every night we have to do the sticker once we're done. So it's a great reading program in that sense of keeping my kids reading this summer.
I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you.
All
Right. The Parks and Recreation Department budget is the same number as it was last month. We did not gain or lose any money, so it is the same number. The monthly expenditures for the month of May, you're going to notice that it's quite a bit of a difference, over 10%. But much of that is salary savings. We're holding those positions for the landscape outsourcing plan that we have, and we had a decrease in the water use due to great management and a very wet spring. Top 10 expenditures, you can see that the salaries, there's a little bit of a difference there. That's again with the golf transition and also again holding the street landscaping vacancies that we have. The other one that I'd like to point out is the landscape contracting. Again, it is tied to the outsourcing of golf courses where previously those were salaries. There are no anomalies that we have to report this month. And the revenue collected, a couple of notes I want to mention here. We're an increase in the general fund on our revenue, mainly due to the sports field light fees that we incurred this year. So we were up about $100,000 there, primarily due to that. Golf, again, that's the settling out of not getting the revenue from Papago and from Maryvale because those are no longer being operated by the Parks and Recreation Department. Also grants, we changed the partners program from having full-time staff manage that. There's one full-time staff and the rest are part-time, where in the past we had full-time individuals, but we can accomplish more with more part-time employees than we would by hiring a full-time employee. So that's why we're reimbursed less in that line, which is the grant line. And then you'll notice that the other category is up slightly, and that's because we did receive a little bit more of 3PI interest for that particular month. And that's all I have.
Any questions? Jim?
Not about this.
Oh, okay.
I have a comment. I just really want to congratulate you all for keeping within your budgets and even under budget. I think it's so important that people out there, residents, see that you're being good stewards of their tax dollars and that we're not just informing them during our budget hearings, but throughout the year that we're keeping an eye on our budget and that we're keeping you all accountable. I mean, the new kid on the block is Parks, and she's at 7% savings, so I don't know, you guys. Human Services at 5 and Libraries at 4. You got to get some competition there, and you can't let her beat you on that, right? Thank you all.
Thank you. Councilman Waring?
It was about new items.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Just being prepared.
Oh, okay. I have a public request to speak. Greta?
Thank you, Chairman Pastor and members of the subcommittee. We have a new beginning with Parks and Rec, with a wonderful new director, eminently qualified. I've known Inger for probably 10 or 12 years and been in contact with her at different assignments she's had over those years. I know she's been with us longer than that, but I've only been with you 15, for better or worse. Thank God we have a truly qualified, by her education, by her training, and her experience with the City of Phoenix Parks and Rec Department. Always active, always dedicated, and always mindful that those who use the parks are numero uno in her eyes. That's what they're there for, the people who use them. I don't use them, I don't climb mountains, but they're an essential part of a city's whole culture and assets. Be grateful we have her. And I think her staff and the morale of her staff will skyrocket with her. Also, I feel the same way about Deanna. She's an exceptional young lady dedicated, hardworking, and questioning when appropriate and suggesting when appropriate. Please listen to both of these valuable executives we have on our total staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Which Deanna was she talking about? I couldn't let it pass.
The only one we know.
Just sure, no. Oh,
Okay, I missed agenda item 15, future agenda items.
okay. So I did turn on my thing for this, and then yes, and then we missed it, so we'll get another bite at the apple here. The one ID card, I thought was going to be on the agenda for this month, but do we know when that update is going to come?
And-
There are people who want to come, from the community, obviously, on both sides, so for folks who ask me, I want to be able to tell them, obviously, as early as possible. I don't need to know today, because the next meeting isn't for a couple months, but
Next meeting is in September.
but I just am curious, when, you don't have to tell me now. But weren't we going to do an update today and then?
We were, but there was, there's no information.
Which is
so-
fine, yeah, which is fine.
So it was like,
I guess at some point if you could let me know, so I can let
So
people know, because people do
probably-
call and ask, so.
more than likely, it will be for September 23rd.
Okay. If that changes then, if you could let me know.
Yeah, okay. Anything else?
We call it the wearing card?
Yeah, we will.
What's that?
The wearing card.
The wearing card? So we're gonna make
Thank
them the wearing
you,
golf
appreciate
courses
it.
And the wearing